Hello everybody, I'm InTheLittleWood, also known as Martin, and welcome back to the channel. So, we are 7 videos in, and we are finally going to delve into the second blog post that was published just after the game's reveal later last year. Today, we'll be discussing NPCs. Those 3 letters stand for non-playable characters. These are artificially driven beings that inhabit our gaming worlds and provide life, enemies, and companions. I think I'd like to divide this up into 2 videos, so today, let's focus on factions. There's a big distinction between those and animals. For now, let's just categorize factions as any living, or I guess technically undead, creature that is inside a Hytale that isn't a typical animal, so you know, a dog, a pig, a cow, whatever it may be. These are the types of creatures that will have allegiances. They're capable of colonizing, they build homes, they communicate with the player, whether it's in a positive or a negative manner. Factions are races of people whose lore we can indulge in the future. They'll likely take up arms with or against us, and we'll have to probably aid them at some point. So to clarify, dogs, no, not a faction. Whereas the Quebecs, yes, faction. So up until recently, we were only aware of around about 7 or 8 factions, but in recent days, we've come to learn of a brand new playable one, and we've also gotten a first glimpse of what another race actually looks like. So working from top to bottom in this NPC's blog post, let's get started. And we begin with the Quebecs. Now, I have actually already covered the Quebecs at some length in a previous video, so I think the simplest thing to do here is a simple copy-paste. Are you ready? Let's go. Point number 4 that you didn't know about Hytale today is the sad backstory of the Quebecs. The story of their birth, their growth, and their death is all quite sad, really. For a new Quebec to enter the world, another has to die. It can't be any other way, so a Quebec never actually gets to meet its own parents. When a Quebec is born, it falls from a tree as a little sprout seedling, and it'll grow into a young Quebec, it'll mature, and at the end of its lifetime, it will become an autumnal elder. When it starts to get to this phase, it will actually begin to slow down and stiffen until eventually it will come to an entire halt. When that happens, there's a huge burst of energy, a huge explosion, and an actual proper tree is left where that Quebec was standing, and as you guessed it, that is where the seedlings then fall from, and the cycle begins again. Apparently, Quebecs can learn about their parents and the history of their race from a special few known as the Tree Singers. Now, we don't have any additional information about them just yet, but it does seem to be quite a mystical name, so I'm wondering if maybe they can walk over to these trees that used to be Quebecs and actually communicate with the souls that inhabit them, or maybe it's just dusty old folk that enjoy tracking history and writing it in books. Whew, well, that saved me a lot of time, didn't it? Anyway, moving on to faction number 2. Working our way down the blog post, we have got the Trorks. The Trorks seem to be a nice blend of 2 traditional fantasy races, both orcs and trolls. Their orc influences seem present in both their posture and also their large jaws at the front of their face, but it's actually their huge teeth and also their skin colorings varying so much that is more typical of trolls. If the screenshots and concept art from the website work hand in hand, then it's safe to assume that we'll get our first encounter with these mobs in Zone 1, known as the Emerald Grove, which is also where the Quebecs are likely to be. It's my guess that the first power struggle we'll encounter inside of the world of Orbis will actually be between these 2 factions. And with the Trorks seeming slightly more ravenous than the Quebecs are, at least just from an artistic standpoint, chances are we are going to be on the side of the Leaf people. So there are actually various different kinds of Trorks that are really interesting. So first and foremost, we've got the bog standard Sentry. That seems like the most basic type. It comes in hand with a spear and it looks like a fighter. A slight step up from there is the level 2 Trork, if you would like to call it that, and that is the Warrior, and it's got a giant axe ready to cut you clean in 2. Next up, we have got the Hunter, and that actually comes, seemingly, with a pet wolf, which looks pretty dangerous. Have you seen how sharp those teeth are? But that does raise the question as to whether taming is going to be inside a Hytale, and whether it will actually extend to us, the players, and if so, what are the limitations? Is it only going to be certain types of NPCs, like will it only be animals, or even then, will it only be a certain subset of animals, and what are going to be the requirements in order to get them on side? Now, as smash 'em and crash 'em as the Trorks may first appear, they do also seem to dabble in magic. You can see right here that we have got a shaman who I'm guessing will heal their allies of all their ailments and any potential health loss. They may even be able to turn that magic against you and actually apply debuffs that are going to make your fights against them that little bit harder. Then, of course, the cream of the crop. They've risen to the top, the Chieftain. Seeing this screenshot of all of them charging through the grove, I'm wondering whether the Chieftain will be present in a lot of fights, or whether they will actually stay back in the encampments that they decided to build for themselves out of wood. I just feel as though there's still going to be one big ultimate Trork that we haven't seen just yet. I'm trying to think of like different titles that are higher than Chieftain. I guess maybe like War Chieftain? I just want to see one almighty massive Trork on the top of a huge throne in the middle of like some crazy camp, and we have to use everything in our power to take him down. So that's the power struggle of the Emerald Emerald Grove out of the way, next up, we've got the Howling Sands in Zone 2. It's here where you'll find a race of large-eared fluffballs known as the Ferans. They've undergone some hardships as well, and they've also been enslaved by this creepy bug race known as the Scaraks, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. It seems to be Ferans of all ages wear these braces on their wrists, and some of them on their ankles as well. Each one has the wind elemental symbol carved into it, and for them, it's a symbol of freedom. But what's interesting about the text that's next to this is it describes that the honor of wearing them is traditional, which could mean a couple of things. This could obviously allude to the fact that the Feran and the Scarak slavery battle has been going on for quite some time, but it doesn't actually clarify whether it's ongoing or whether it's a thing of the past. But I have reason to believe that this is going to be the main focus of the Zone 2 story. We are going to be helping the Ferans free their fellow furballs and ultimately conclude the story with a huge battle with a being known as the Sand Empress. Moving on now to faction number 4. The Slothians. So this faction was actually shown to us during the announcement trailer, but they weren't particularly highlighted. It wasn't until I delved into the concept art that things started to click and it all started to make sense as to just how much of an impact they are going to have on this game. So we first get a glimpse of these slow bros during the rapid fire biome reel, and to begin with, a lot of us just assumed they were another animal inside of the jungle, and that's it. That's typically where they live, right? But it was this artwork right here that actually tipped us off to something more. You can already see inside of here we've got the Trorks, the Feran, and even the Sand Empress that we've spoken about so far today, but right there in the bottom left corner, they've got their own logos. So what do we know about them so far? Realistically, not a great deal so far in terms of their story, but we do have a lot of information about where they live. Looking at the tropical jungle research artwork, and you can see that many of their kind are destined to live in the lower levels of Zone 4. Specifically level 3, but I can see them creeping up into number 2. It's very unlikely that they'll want to go any lower though. Now you might be wondering to yourselves, well, in the trailer, that doesn't look like it's underground. But it does. Go back, load up the trailer again, have a little look, and above those tall trees, you can actually see giant stalactites. Stalactites, if you don't know, are basically rock icicles. Let's just phrase it that way. And you can see them right there above the tree line on the underbelly of the layer above. This has me really, really excited about the layers. The layers aren't just going to feel like a 4 or 5 block deep thing. They're actually going to feel like entirely different breathing worlds. And if you don't know, one of my favorite shows ever is Sword Art Online. I know it's a bit of a Marmite show. Some love it, some hate it. But in that story, the idea is that the entire world is stacked on top of one another in various different levels. And as you ascend upwards, you get to a final castle, and each one feels like its own living, breathing biome. And that's what we have here. So if this concept art is to be believed, we could be seeing upwards of 5 layers per zone. On Orbis, there are 6 zones confirmed already via the World Gem blog post. That is 30 unique areas to explore. I mean, sure, some of them will be basic caving systems, but others are going to feel like entire little pocket universes. And let's not forget as well, that's only on Orbis. That is only one of the 5 planets in the entire of the Ultiverses. So if we were to multiply that number by 5 again, that is 150 areas to indulge in. That's so much. But maybe a moment ago, you might have heard me say they probably wouldn't want to go any lower, and you're probably wondering what I meant by that. Well, as cool as they are, they do seem to be a little bit stuck. They've somehow managed to get themselves a really nice peaceful paradise, which is away from the devastated lands at the very top where the sky is, but on the layer beneath them, there are dinosaurs, which they probably don't want to mess with. So they'll never see daylight, but they'll also never get eaten, so they're making the best of a bad situation. I'll give them that. Let's move on to faction number 5. The Fawns. So if we go back to this iconography artwork, let's ignore the Gaia symbols, the Varyn symbols, all the elemental stuff, and there is one left on the list. These are the Fawns. Up until recently, we had 0 information about this faction, and admittedly, we still don't have that much, but let me share with you what I found. So you may be familiar with what Fawns are. You might have seen them in a fantasy flick or two. For me, the first one that came to mind was Mr. Tumnus from the Good Old Lion, Witch in the Wardrobe. Good old James McAvoy with his umbrella out, clopping along the place. The Fawns in this game, though, or at least in the concept art, look really, really cool. They look way more badass. A little while ago, we were given our first glimpse of what they'll actually look like from the environment and creatures concept art, and alongside them, we see 3 white wolves. Dire wolves, snow wolves, doesn't matter what you want to call them. My guess is that this gang are going to be hanging out in the snowy forests of Layer 0 of Zone 3, which currently, I don't think we have a name for. If you do know what it is, let me know. My entire reasoning for them being in Zone 3 is simply because of the wolves and their fur. It's right for the environment. They've obviously evolved and changed to suit that area as a predator. And also the reasoning for layer 0, specifically being, you know, on the top layer of it, out where the sky and the sun is simply because the Feran is wearing braces and a horned mask, which is actually created from bark, and you need trees for that, right? It all starts to add up. There is one more instance of wood and snow though in the concept art, and that is right here. You can see snowy mountain peaks with watchtowers, stone walls, thatched roofs, and even mentions of alchemy in this little square over here that could actually line up quite nicely with the bottle that's sitting on our fawn friend's hip. Although if we just hit the brakes for a moment, the remainder of the contents on this artwork right here actually start to paint a very different picture. Signs of corruption and decay due to what looks like void magic are present. And this all starts to lead into what I think could potentially be the story of Zone 3 of Orbis. Will we see the fawns going up against creatures known as Outlanders? And they are going to be faction number 6. The Outlanders. My guess is that they're called that simply because they're not from this planet. They don't originate from Orbis. Given all of the purple colorings, it's probably a safe bet to assume they're from Nexus, which I'm only assuming is where Varyn is also from. He's probably sent them down to Orbis to try and start spreading the decay and claiming land for their own. So I'm not going to try too hard to try and identify what the Outlanders would look like for now, simply because there are too many different mobs that could play into this role. We have various different kinds of mobs that have got the word void in front of them. We even have this sketch right here, or 2 sketches of characters that are simply called Varyn Spawn. So I'm just going to end up getting it wrong, so let's just leave it there for now. But going back to the Outlanders concept art, you can see that this is building up to be a really big conflict. It could be our first introduction to Varyn as a character, and it seems to be loads of stuff to do. Push back the void magic, destroy the pools of purple, slay the shaman that's at the top of the watchtower, and maybe even close the portal for good. Or worst case, hop through it and have a day trip to Nexus to face a dragon. So take everything I've just said there with a pinch of salt. I'm just sort of putting pieces together, and they are starting to fit. It's just food for thought. Now we move on to faction number 7, the Scaraks. So a little earlier on, we spoke about the Ferans and how they've been enslaved by a race known as the Scaraks. It's now time to talk about them. They are a bug-type race that I'd originally written off as just simply monsters, as opposed to an actual faction, but the fact that they build their own structures, they seem to have the consciousness to force others to do their work, and to also keep them in line, makes them just pass over that line into being a faction. So we've already established that they reside in Zone 2, the Howling Sands, and they already make my skin crawl. They're horrific. They take on lots of nasty forms. In the trailer, we see around about 2 or 3 of them, namely the warriors. They're likely to be the ground troops. We've got the locusts, which are the eye in the sky, and then we also have the workers. And my guess is that the workers are going to be like the runt of the litter, and they're going to be forced to work alongside the enslaved Ferans because they're the worst of the bunch. The last type, though, is a special hardhead known as a shield Scarak, who, according to the text right here, has actually been utilized by the Sand Empress herself, their leader, in a previous battle before, and I don't know if it was used to smash down walls or to simply obliterate enemies, but that's all we know for now. Every single Scarak you see in the game will be born from eggs laid by a brood mother. They begin as a larva, then it's unknown what actually decides their evolution. It could just simply be potluck with genetics, maybe certain brood mothers only produce certain types of, Scaraks, or maybe even the Empress gets to pick or choose what she needs depending on her situation. So that's what they look like, and that's how they move. Now let's see how they live. And this is entirely why I believe that they should be their own faction by definition, because they make active prisons, they manage them, they build them out of sandstone in these huge pyramid-esque structures. It looks really, really divisive. So first up, we have got their standard prison. So it's basically got a pyramid on the top, a couple of watchtowers, and beneath the surface is where apparently the cells reside. But this is only their most basic structure that they make. I step up from that and we have the Ziggurat, an even larger fortress which resembles their own body shape for the most part. And at the center of it all, there's even mention of a crystal. Are they the earliest faction that we encounter, other than that one shaman with the Trorks that can utilize magic within Orbis? Potentially. Before you even get to that room, though, you have to get past the main building's walls and the 4 large watchtowers that overlook the area. You want to be sneaky and go underground? Well, you're out of luck, because you're more likely to get caught by Scaraks there, as they have got a very sophisticated underground cave network to get around. This is insane. But to top it all off, the crowning jewel building is the Sand Palace, a gargantuan structure with even more watchtowers and holes high enough for them to fly into, meaning that it's an easy flow of soldiers to get over the enemies that attack them. You might think that's an open entry, but I imagine the second you get in there, it's going to be absolutely littered with bugs. If you do somehow manage to penetrate this building and you make your way beneath the surface, there is apparently a portal waiting for you right there to take you to a new instance where the Sand Empress resides. And any eagle-eyed viewers will actually know that we've already seen her logo. Have a little look back at the iconography artwork. You can see it's right there, and going back to our current artwork, the Scarak's rune is actually influenced by it. So there you go, all the evidence is in place. That is what I think the story of Zone 2 is. Scarak's versus Feran's, Sand Empress is the big boss, let's get it. And now we move on to faction number 8, and it's definitely the one that we know the least about so far, and this is the Klops. So these are a little bit more light-hearted, and they're a really standout race for me actually. So it's spelt with a K, so K-L-O-P-S, obviously short for Cyclops, one-eyed monsters. Mike Wazowski! So from the artwork that we can see right here, the Klop's hidey hole, they actually seem really intelligent and seem to behave more like humans in terms of their home comforts. I'll be honest, I wouldn't mind kicking back in that armchair, having a nice bare rug and a roaring fire to keep me cozy. He's even blowing bubbles. Look at him go. And seeing the Cyclops portrayed in this way is actually a really nice change of pace. Usually they're the boneheaded, dribbling idiots that are good for nothing but smash, kill, crush. It seems as though they like the finer things in life, which makes me wonder, are they going to be the very economic savvy characters inside of the world of Orbis? Maybe they'll be making a killing at the trading posts over in Zone 2, or maybe if in each of the villages they are actually running the stores that are there. I think we should keep our eye on them. Just the one. Get it? Now we move on to faction number 9, and this one again, not too much information, but I think they're going to have a big influence on the underwater areas of Orbis. These, everybody, are the mermen. They have been cropping up left, right and center for quite some time now. They were in the announcement trailer, they're on the media page of the website. Let's discuss them, because they do seem to exist both under the water, which is where I think they'll likely play their biggest part, but also on top of the land as well. But note how they are still by swampy river-like areas, places with high humidity and a lot of water around. I'm not saying they need water to survive, but I think they just prefer that kind of climate. I think we'll get a much deeper insight to the lives of these characters once we get a more in-depth post about the oceans. Do they live aboard sunken ships? Have they created their own imagining of Atlantis? Who knows? Can they command animals? Like, look in this screenshot right here. You can literally see him pointing at the player. I don't know if that's a, what are you doing here? Or if it's a, get it, boys! Either way, with the submersible blocks in this game, literally anything is going to be possible for them, and I can't wait. We now move on to our 10th and final faction for today. We have got the Goblins. First seen in the announcement trailer, falling off of bridges, wearing frying pans and wielding bombs, I'd hazard a guess that these green guys are going to be encountered very frequently throughout the world of Orbis, but not necessarily under Varyn's rule. In the trailer, they're seemingly running at the character because you have gone and entered their dungeon, a prime location for what? That's right, treasure. If you take a look at this concept art right here, it has the note, "Goblins bring home everything fine," which gives us the impression that they are going to be quite the hoarders. It could be as useless as a frying pan or as valuable as a crystal, but to a goblin, it's just something that's shiny and they want it. I think this is actually going to be one of those things where actually we're the bad guy. We're entering their home, taking their treasure, and we're kind of slaughtering them left, right, and center. Oops. Now, the reason that I've chosen these guys as a faction rather than just a monster is because they seem to sort of group together and move as a unit, and on top of that, they don't just have that motivation of, kill that thing that moved. They're protecting something that they love. They just seem to have a little bit more character than a typical mob that you'll hack and slash and never see again. That's all I'm saying. To round things out today, I want to talk about one final faction, and that's you, the player. Quite excitingly, Hytale have just announced that there is now a second playable race within the game in the form of elves. This accompanies the humans to make 2 factions that the player gets to control, and I'm sure there'll be more revealed between now and the game's release, or at least a beta, so keep an eye out for that. But obviously, we could have just as much conflict between our characters as the NPCs have with one another, but at the moment, I think we have peace. If you have a little look at the trailer at the start of it, you can see that the elves and the humans are looking at one another, there's a simple wave, and then they give them that unspoken nod of the, yeah, we're cool. And then of course, by the time we get to the end of the trailer, they're fighting the Void Dragon together. So at the moment, it seems as though elves and humans work hand in hand with no worries. So that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I do want to go further into detail about other kinds of creatures in the world. I want to do a video solely on every single animal that we've been shown so far inside of Hytale. Some of them hiding in the background, some of them in plain sight. And then I also want to do a separate video simply on monsters. I'm talking skeletons, the undead, void monsters, Varyn's creatures, everything like that. They're all to come in a future video. But for now, I'm going to pass a question off to you. Currently, we have got confirmation of races that reside in zones 1, 2, 3, and the lower levels of number 4. My question is, who lives on the top layer of zone 4? It's the blasted lands, it's volcanic, it's ashy, it's brimstony. What traditional fantasy characters do you think you could see there? I really look forward to reading those in the comment section below, replying to a couple of them. And remember, if you do want to discuss anything Hytale, we actually have a dedicated chat for that over on my Discord. The link is always in the description, or if you can remember it right now, it's discord.gg/InTheLittleWood. Be sure to subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss any future update videos, and click on one of these videos you can see right now. You might just learn another thing or two that you didn't know about the game already, so you're going to be the most prepared out of all of your friends going into the beta. Thank you so much for watching, leave a like on the video, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.